Helen, welcome. The topic has to do with a post that was in my Facebook group, Ask and It Is Given. The post speaks to the past and does the past affect me now, especially when I've experienced something in the past that is particularly traumatic. And the worse it is, the harder it is to go into these conversations and understand them. And so, Helen, the other thing would be maybe just an introduction for the context. Most people, if they're on my channel, know something about me, but just the context about.
I'd love to give a little bit of like the sort of added nuance for me of that context you've just given as well, which is the idea, well, you can just think something different. So I think that is the key piece, which led to our conversation on the back of that post, which led to us being here. And I think that's the crucial piece that I'm really curious for us to talk about that and explore that and see what we discover,
Right.
see what that shows
Right.
anybody else. To give context to me, my context, three principles and law of attraction, my spiritual journey started in 2018. It started in earnest. And it was actually the three principles was the first thing I came across. Having had some little dabblings and dalliances into yoga and Buddhism and starting to sort of open my mind thinking there's something else going on apart from just our psychology. But I also was aware of you and your work. So I also had law of attraction kind of, it was always sort of on the edge. In 2024, I discovered something new, which had me actually even more realize why the law of attraction is true and why things that you say, things that Esther Abraham say is true, things that other people I've heard in law of attraction are true. It's like, there's been another level of, yes, I get it now. And with law of attraction, it was one of those where it had gone from an idea to, oh yeah, I completely see how this is working. I completely see the law of attraction is a thing because I can see that what I'm experiencing, what I'm creating in my reality, I am attracting that. I know that at some level I'm asking for that, but I really don't want to be asking for that. I really want to be asking for something else. But how do I do that? Like that was kind of the question that was underlying my changes last year. So what I discovered was that I could stop asking, but not through any, oh, I'll just stop asking that. I needed to use a modality. I had to use something to get rid of the part of me that kept asking for stuff that I didn't really, really want, that didn't really feel good. And in sorting that out, now all the law of attraction stuff is like, oh my God, yeah, it's so obvious that I'm not going to think that thing that feels awful. Obviously, I'm going to shift and feel something nicer. It's easy now, it's effortless. It's easy to see how we create a wonderful world when we're in that aligned place. So it's been an incredible 7, 8 years of all sorts of exploration. And so I'm really excited that we're here now because I totally get it. And yet I think there's going to be some stuff where we go, no, 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 I see it differently. And that's what I'm
Yes.
really interested in.
Yeah. And I think that's such an important thing to start is that there are disagreements. There can be, right? Disagreements or the appearance of conflict. And especially on these topics, because everybody, well, but what if it's clinical depression? What if it's this horrible thing? Not just like, a teacher laughed at me when I was a kid. What about a horrible situation that happened to me of severe abuse or violence or something like that? How can you equate these things, right? So that you'll get to a lot of conflict sometimes. And one of the things that I see is that all conflict arises from a communication happening on different levels. In this conversation specifically, there is something which is a physical manifested level of reality. There is my physical body, and there are things around me and all of that. There are conditions I'm living in and situations that I'm experiencing. So that is a manifested level of my experience. And then there's something non-physical also happening. the fact that there is a physical body, but the fact that it's moving, the fact that I'm imagining things points to a non-physical dimension. And it's like the front of a hand and the back of a hand. So usually we'll say, yeah, that's there, that this is here, but it isn't. It's all here. It's all here. It's all one thing. And we're the front of the hand or the back of the hand. However, if somebody is talking about the front of the hand, and then I'm speaking about the back of the hand, we all have conflict. Well, I disagree. I disagree with what you just said. Well, we're not even talking about the same thing. And then the more we disagree, the more we're reinforcing that. So I think that's an important starting point. And so then in our conversation, I don't know if this is possible, but as we speak, I think we would say, I'm talking at this level or something. Maybe that'll be helpful. We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's a way to enter the conversation?
Well, if I can go back to what Leo first shared.
Yes, in the post. Yeah,
Yeah.
that started this all. Yeah.
So he'd shared, when you stop investing energy in fixing yourself and put it into creating what you want and need instead, life gets good. And which was actually really similar to something I'd shared. I'd posted, when you're so busy trying to manage and control what you don't want, there's no space for what you want.
Yes.
And I think it was something that you'd shared, Dominic, about, well, you're only getting what you don't want because you're thinking of something that you don't want. You're putting your attention on something you don't want, and therefore that's what you're getting. But it's absolutely instantly connecting to that conversation about levels, because at the human level, let's say at the front of the hand level, it doesn't feel like we can just say, oh, well, I'll stop thinking that then. And where you mentioned trauma before, so usually when there's been something that has felt to the system like a trauma, no matter what the cause, no matter what the situation, no matter what the circumstances, if it feels like a trauma in that person's system, then it's different. And in fact, the phrase I'd used, which made me smile when you challenged it back, because I'd said at that human level, then in that circumstance, it doesn't feel like there's a conscious thought that I can choose to stop thinking in order to think something else. And you were like, what? Where's this thought happening then? If it's not happening in consciousness, how could it not be a conscious thought? Like, where's a thought going to be if it's not conscious? Whatever is outside of consciousness? But it's not just as simple as put down the yucky thought and pick up a nicer one. Not when it's something that has felt traumatic at some level.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it says a lot in the word stop. The word stop and the word no defies all law. There is no way to stop a thought. There is no way to say no to anything. So you cannot stop thinking a thought. It's not possible. You cannot stop thinking a thought. So on that, I think we have agreement. So it's not possible for anyone to stop thinking a thought. And so that does defy law. They try to change their thinking, and ultimately they end up in frustration. And then mostly they dismiss this nonsense. That guy said, it's all about your thinking. I've been trying to change my thinking forever to create what I really want in my life because it's in the word stop, in the word no, in the word what I don't want. It's just not possible to eliminate it. That is law. All that is all that is experienced. And all that is will never be less than all that is. Nothing will ever be eliminated from the all. There is no thought that will ever be eradicated from the all. And we will have access to all of it eternally.
There's so much in that, Dominic. Yeah, I'm trying to decide which angle to respond from. Can I tell my story of last year? Because that might help.
That makes it practical. I
Yeah.
rely on the guests to be more practical.
Well, you
I mean,
geek
the
out on law of
principles of
attraction.
these things. These my guests can relate it.
So I was experiencing things in life that I didn't want. One of the key things was in my community, there wasn't the level of engagement that I wanted. I wanted more people posting, sharing, commenting, and it kept feeling like it was tumbleweed. I was feeling frustrated with it. So, instant sign that there's something off because of how it was feeling. And I knew enough to know that it's not just about saying to them, come on, folks, you need to buck your ideas up. I knew that there was something in me to resolve. In fact, some of the comments were about, even on that post, fixing yourself. But I felt there's something in me that needs to be fixed, which is keeping creating this reality. I don't want this, and yet it keeps happening, and it doesn't feel good. So I know that there's something wrong. I reached that point having done lots of, let's use the phrases, clearing, enlightenment activities at the level of the human. So I get the fact that at the level of the truth of who we are, everything is included, everything is great, everything is good. But to me, at the level of the human, that's where we get to choose. That's where there's preferences. That's where I don't like plaque on my teeth, so I brush my teeth. That's where I get to say, I don't like this negativity in my system. I want to do something to not have that in my system, in my human system. So I had done loads and loads of stuff prior to last year to lighten and lighten and lighten this negativity in the human system until I'd reached this point last year where it was like, well, there's still clearly negativity because I'm still creating this reality and I'm still not loving it. I'm still feeling this frustration. It was like it was hidden in a bag, stuffed in a cupboard, behind the chair, covered in some old sports equipment. It felt like at the human level, it felt like there was something completely ungettable at, something that was so well hidden that although I could feel there was something there, I could not access it from this human experience. There was no, as I said the other day, conscious thought. I didn't know what was creating it. I just knew something in me was creating this. And so that took me to this new modality, which when I read about it was just such a yes to, oh my God, this is the thing I've been looking for. There's this something in me which nothing else has got to. And this modality is promising it's going to get to it. And in fact, in a way that will clear it out of this human system. And it worked. Because what it does is clear the reaction that we had in a moment of trauma, which can be a simple moment, can be what we would normally class as a horrendous moment, but it can be something that we class as a normal moment. It doesn't really matter because the thing that matters is that in that moment it felt too much for me. It felt too overwhelming, and so it got stuffed back in that cupboard underneath all the sports equipment. And there it stayed, and over the top got layered a whole bunch of other thoughts and strategies and approaches and tactics. Like, well, in fact, the thing that I'd stuffed in the cupboard was I am wrong. So over the top of that had been layered, well, if I do this and if I do this enough and if I do this well enough and if I control that situation and if I do this perfectly and if I behave like this with these people, then maybe I'll be good. Maybe then that I am wrong will disappear. Maybe then nobody will notice the fact I'm wrong because I really thought that's this very deep level, that's who I thought I was. Then nobody will see it. If I do enough song and dance up here, if I look impressive enough up here, then nobody will spot the fact that I'm wrong. Everybody will think I'm good. And of course, we suffer in that experience. And that's exactly what I'd done all my life. Tried to be the right kind of person, tried to be the good person, until I'd cleared all that stuff out the way and it made it so obvious. Well, you might have done all that, Helen, but you've still got that thing in the cupboard that you've not addressed. As I say, until I did the MACE method, and it's like, ah, now it feels good. Now it feels good. Now, if that thought was to pass through my mind now, and I haven't noticed it ever since then, apart from when I've talked about it, or if any other thought that was related to it passed through my mind now, there's no reaction. And that's the key thing. Law of attraction is all about how you feel. It's not really about the thoughts. We're
Yeah.
creating from how we feel. So that all of that experience that used to feel awful no longer feels awful. It's like there's been a disconnect made possible. Thoughts like that and my feeling system. So now they're just thoughts. They cause no reaction anymore because there's no I am wrong stuffed in the cupboard. And therefore now there's the space to create. All my attention has been released to focus on creation in alignment with what I want instead.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. It's a great example of what Sydney Banks said. There is only one creator. That creator is thought. And he says, which is so confusing why he did this, but he used the word thought to represent a formless energy equated with consciousness, equated with infinite intelligence. And that's the word he used. He says those three things are one thing. It's just an energy. He says there's one creator, and that's the only creator there is. So what he referred to, what I like in the teachings of Abraham, is they say it's all vibration. And so that's, if you put the two together, that's easier to understand, because what was Sid saying? Does he mean thought or thought? Well, there's a thought with a small t that he refers to, and that's my thought that I am wrong. I am wrong. I am worthless. That's a small t thought, but that's not the creator of anything. And this is the value that's not creating anything. Those are words. That is the creation. All thoughts that we think are after the fact of what Sid was pointing to. All that we think are after the fact of what Abraham points to. So when Sid says it's all thought and Abraham says it's all vibration, that there's only one creator, and that is that energy. The energy is the only thing creating anything that's on the front of the hand. And so that's why people try to, we're both coaching people too, but people who come off and say, so what should I do about this issue? I think I must have an unworthiness issue. I think I might have some sort of a scarcity issue or something, because I can never make enough money. I can never be in a relationship. They always break down, or these relationships have a pattern, like it's always violent or ugly. What am I like? How do I do this? And people have told me to think differently about it, but it's like, so everyone's talking on the front of the hand. That's not what your problem is. It's not what you're thinking. It doesn't matter how much you change your thinking. There is, before the manifestation, that's a problem. We're going to call it a problem. That's the source of your experience and your creation. It is not your thinking. It is not the thoughts that you think. You can't improve to think better thoughts. And you've had that experience. You've had that experience where none of it made a difference, because from the front of the hand, a lot of ideas come, like, if I behave different, people will think I'm more valuable. If I educate myself, then they'll know I'm more valuable because I'm smarter. So a lot of the front of the hand, there's a lot of activity to deal with the experiences which are not created at the front of the hand. The physical finite me is created along with this condition. There's a physical finite me in this scarcity and loneliness and sadness and depression. It's an entire whole story. And the whole story, the whole expression is one. It is reflecting a mix of vibrations and energies, which are always in perfect harmony. And law of attraction makes that so. Nothing is ever in conflict. So the war that's taking place in the world is in perfect harmony with my energies and the mix of energies within me. And those energies are reflecting into all of this experience. So, somewhere inside of me, what's going on over there is happening inside of me. And that is the perfect reflection. I get to watch it on the news. And as long as I sit there judging those others, because I'm not like that, right? Especially the ones who are bombing the babies or the whatever, right? Like depending which side. Now I'll take sides and give me enough resources and I will arm myself and go to war on against the other side. So I am creating, contributing, adding into the pool. Seth, who was channeled by Jane Roberts, said, "You create your own reality, individually and en masse." So as an individual, I'm doing this. It is really the expression, the allowing of these vibrations, the tolerating of vibration that don't feel good to me because I think I deserve them or because I think that you can't expect everything to be rosy, can you? Don't be some kind of a Pollyanna. Like, you can't ignore what's going on. So, tolerating my attention to my continued activation on the energy that is creating my reality.
There's a really valuable distinction in that for me between fundamentally how am I feeling in the presence of that experience. So let's take the war example because it's obviously a really good extreme version. Same as that thought I am wrong, which at one time might feel like a gut punch and now has no effect on me. It's the same with observing war, observing anything else. The more we are clean, clear, in a healthy vibration, the more we can respond to what's happening in the world in a healthy way versus what you're saying is the reaction in us, which goes into the right, wrong, good, bad, they shouldn't be doing that. The resistance, which of course then perpetuates the same resistance in the world, perpetuates the same antagonism, the same battle. So the battle within us.
Well said.
There was a bit before which perhaps gives a linking point between the thoughts, like we can't stop thoughts. Thoughts are just going to come. That's just what they do. And yes, we are the creator. Ultimately, we are the source. There is one source of creation, and this is all it. As though in the middle of those two things, there's identities, because it wasn't just a thought. It wasn't just words. It wasn't because there weren't even conscious words in my mind that was what was going on. There was a feeling, and there was, yeah, like you were saying about people in scarcity or people in lack of some kind. It's like, well, this is just who I am. This is just how I am. There is no other option. You know, the person watching the TV, oh, well, this is just who I am. I'm the kind of person who's, goes into battle over stuff that's wrong. So it's all that we are, very confused, thinking it is this identity, like this is who I am. I'm not all that I am. I'm not the all of everything. I am wrong. I am lacking. I am not enough. So it's not just a thought, it's been taken on unknowingly as an identity. And even though, despite everything I'd seen and realized for myself around that, still at the human level, there was this identity because it was so hidden. Unknowingly, this identity, I am wrong. It wasn't just a thought, but everything that filtered, if all that I am was filtering through that identity, was then creating that reality. And that for me was the key distinction that led it from either like you were saying, the superficial, well, if I can just sort out my behavior or thoughts, then I'll be okay. It was the link between, well, that's not worked. And having explored the back of the hand and seen the truth of all that I am, and seeing, well, that's not worked either. Like, that's amazing that I am this infinite, eternal potential of creation. And yet, that's also not resolved this feeling and this creation in my reality. And so, this identity was like this linchpin between those two that I'd never known of before, but which made so much sense. Hence why I'd said it's not a conscious thought. There was no conscious thought. I wasn't walking around going, oh gosh, I am wrong. There was none of
Mhm.
that. It was just this ugh feeling and stuff I didn't like in the world. And this identity piece, these hidden identities you just said about innocent. We unknowingly created these negative identities in moments of stress, in moments of emotional overwhelm. And then we became them. It just happened. It's like that we didn't mean to. We didn't even know we'd created it in the first place.
I think you hit on something really important. This is the power of focus, which is focused consciousness. Abraham says that focused consciousness is thought.
Okay.
Thought is focused consciousness. So when we say identity, we could say definition. There's not a you until defined. And the minute you say defined, you've now limited an all, then the identity or the personality comes into play. That is the first creation. But here's the thing, that which is created cannot create. So the identity is creating nothing.
So what do you say is creating? So in my
There
example,
is only one creator.
and so what do you say with what I've described and where to me
Yes.
it's like all that
Yes.
I am was filled.
Yeah, let's use a metaphor. I am all that is. I am all that is. I. We all use the same word. We all mean the same thing. I am. And we all can experience I in infinite ways. But all of us are an experience of I. I cannot experience what you experience because you are the creator of your perspective. The I that is you is created from that perspective. So, as a metaphor, I am all that is. Kind of boring here. I get it. It's all that is. But what I'll do is grab a Lego figure just to spend the day. Grab a Lego figure, put it together, and then that way I can have some activity. But it isn't a matter of physically putting together a Lego figure. I create an identity. There's a nasty one, there's a loving one, there's a powerful one, and there's one that is weak. So, in fact, give me an eternity and I'll create all of them because I'm not just going to create Lego figures with power, right? After a while, I want the weak ones, right? Like I want all of it. Give me eternity and I will astonish you with the identities created that I can create. Now, that Lego figure, when I play, is a complete experience. So it's a complete experience. That Lego figure is within my entire creation. I build an entire Lego world. But this Lego figure is within an entire Lego world. And this Lego figure is experiencing scarcity and loneliness. It's unable to find relationship, which is kind of nuts because I got relationship candidates all around it. There is nothing but abundance. There isn't any more available than what is there. You couldn't have a word big enough to cover abundance. But this identity that I've created is for a purpose that it cannot understand. Number one, because it's not actually conscious. It is not conscious. It is an aspect of my consciousness. It's not a conscious Lego figure. My consciousness has been focused, an aspect of it has been focused as that Lego figure, while the greater part of me remains here, getting hungry, making a sandwich, coming back to play. And it just experienced this horrible trauma because the car crashed. I got hungry and went and got something to eat and came back and picked up on it again. But when I picked up on it again, see, here's the thing in playing the front of the hand versus where I sit in the back of the hand, we're using the word play. Sydney Banks was asked, there's some unpublished writings. I learned of them in a conversation with Linda Kearing and Sherry Hickman, who were very early students. Linda Kearing wrote a book. She wrote the first book with Sydney Banks, and then she went on with him to transcribe teachings and all of that. But they have these old manuscripts of questions that got asked. So the word play is interesting. He was asked, Sid, what is nature? It's an interesting question. What is nature? Basically, what is the front of the hand? What is the manifested world? That was the question. Sid, what is nature? And his response was, nature is God's playground. It's where God goes to play with thought. So in that understanding or metaphor, the Lego figure cannot do anything. Any attention to the Lego figure, its identity, and how to change its identity, and how to find out how that identity got to be the way that it is. The Lego figure is simply a focus of my own consciousness as that Lego figure, and what it reflects back to me from that finite perspective is myself, a world of me. From that perspective looks that way. And so there's nothing to improve, nothing can be improved. However, what happens from a focus of the consciousness is an expansion of all that I am. Because that Lego figure cannot live in a world of my creation. That focus of consciousness, finite consciousness within all, cannot exist without desiring greater expression of all that I am. And then that direction is one direction. It is joyful. It is positive. It is creative. Now, I didn't want a robot, so I created it with free will so it could think and choose whether it expands into something or resists the expansion. And so that's the extent of the will that that little Lego figure has. So having said all that, I looked at the identity and integrated it into a front of the hand, back of the hand. And by the time there's an identity, we're at the front of the hand. Before it, the energy creating is before the identity. And that which is created cannot create. So all creation can only happen from its source.
Yeah, so the identity can't create. So I get it in that the ultimate the creator is source, essence, the universe, God, whatever we want to call it. But given that has created this Lego figure with this particular identity, given what you were saying before about the world of the person who's watching the war TV shows, my world of God's people still not engaging, to me, that Lego figure is a filter on all of what could be created. There's infinite possibilities of what could be created. But then that gets filtered down because if I've created this Lego figure who has this narrative, this identity, then in that filtration process, inevitably taking all that is into this limit is going to create that kind of limited world because it's like there's nothing else could be created from that filtering process, narrowing it down through that particular Lego figure identity.
Yeah, very good. Imagine taking such an energy and condensing and focusing it like that. This is where the expansion, people talk about how, but all that is all that is. What do you mean expansion? Well, it must expand or it's not infinite. And, I've often done this metaphor. I'll draw a box and I'll say, this is all that is. And eventually someone smart will say, wait a minute, but that's finite. You just drew a box, right? So I say, oh, I'm sorry. You're right. I didn't mean to do that. What I meant was, this is all that is. And I'll draw a bigger box, bigger than what I drew. And they'll say, oh, you just put another limit on it. I go, okay, sorry about that. And I'll draw a bigger box. And they'll say, this isn't helping. Well, watch, let me do it like this. Is that helping? No, it isn't. You're still limiting it. And you have to keep increasing the box. So eternal infinite implies expansion. Because if all that is this, it's finite. So it's expansion. But how can all that is expand? It cannot become something. That's the paradox. How can all that is expand? It is all that is. And it's expanding. That doesn't make sense, because to become more than it is, it implies there's something it is not, which then means it is not eternal and infinite. Because, can you see the paradox?
Well, yes, and there's a couple of bits that come to mind with it. One is that from the level of the Lego character, from the level of the human, that level of focus, contraction, limitation instantly sets up a tension between, I know that I'm the truth is I'm all that is. God, but I don't feel that. Jesus, this feels really tight, like my clothes have shrunk. And that tension is the perfect call that's saying, yeah, remember that you're all that is. It's like, that's the beauty of that suffering, is like, yeah, you've forgotten that you're all that is. You think you're just this little identity, but you're all this. So I see that as the call to expand, is the call to expand from believing I'm
Yes.
just this to remember.
And the call to expansion is not backward into all that you are, it is forward into all that you are. So all that is takes a finite aspect of itself. And now let's cut up all that is into infinite aspects of what it is. That tension, which Abraham has described as desire, that tension, which is desire, is the calling of all that you are through who you think you are. And so now you have infinite, finite aspects of all that is being called forward to be all that I am. I'm being called to be all that I am. Now, if you imagine infinite, finite aspects of the all becoming, expanding to be and to express more of all that they really are, the all becomes more of all that it is. The expansion, the creation, the growing, the infinite is a greater and greater and greater and greater expression of all that it is. And that is infinite and eternal. That's us. And Abraham teaching is so distinct. There is no option on the expansion. So you don't get a free will about that. You as an identity have the consciousness focused as an identity. There is no option on the expansion. So once you go to the front of the hand, which is the manifested finite perspective of this, there is the desire to be all that you are. That question. There is only, I've often said it as there is only one will in the universe, and that is the will of God. Sorry, Sydney Banks said that. I hated the statement because I'm like, what the hell? What do you mean? I know I have a will. I can decide anything I want. And Sid said, there's only one will. There's only the will of God. And so what is the will of God? What would be the desire of consciousness? Well, I know it doesn't want money, so I know that that's not what it desires. What would be the will of God? And so consciousness, the only force in the universe, is the force of knowing or awareness. It's the only force there is. What the hell would all that is be aware of? What would it be aware of? Well, it's all that is. The only thing it could be aware of is itself. The only will there is, the only force there is a force of awareness, an energy of self-awareness. There's only a self-awareness that there is. And so know thyself is the only will there is. It's the only calling there is to know thyself. And the all will know itself in all the ways that it can. And one of those ways is through you and I. Bashar, who's another channeler, says, you will continue, your consciousness will continue expanding, expanding, expanding until you know yourself as all that is from your unique perspective. So you're still not all that is. It does not matter. In eternity, you will one day know yourself as all that is, and that is only from your unique perspective. So here's the other thing that implies, that Bashar says, this identity that is you, that is eternal. It never ceases to exist. Nothing that God thinks ever ceases to exist. And God thought you. You are essential to all that is. You, this identity, this knowing of you, will never cease to exist. It is eternal.
That feels like it could open up a whole another rabbit warren of conversation.
Right.
Bromley, I want to pull it back to something you said before. In fact, interestingly, that you said the will of God, because before we started this call, that phrase popped into my mind, and I was like, that's not something I'd usually think. That's an interesting phrase to come to me. But yeah, you're talking about the expansion, and it kind of comes back to what we were saying at the very beginning about where we'll have the idea that, well, my trauma is bigger, and therefore it creates a bigger stretch between where I feel I am and what Dominic's going on about. Like when you're really in that identity of the one who's been traumatized, and it feels so outside of your control, outside of your choice to be anything other than this. And then you have a Dominic coming along going, but you can, and it's all here, and it's all abundance, and
you can be or do or have anything.
Exactly. And so I just wanted to highlight that one, that kind of experience, as another brilliant example of that tension. And the greater the feeling of tension, the more we're pissed off by the truth, basically, the more it's like, well, first of all, it's calling you forward into that expansion. But I guess it's also a point in time to be able to acknowledge that, to even know that I'm actually not frustrated with Dominic. I'm not frustrated with the law of attraction. I'm not frustrated with Abraham. That feeling of frustration is that feeling of tension between somewhere in me, I know this is the truth, but my God, it feels so contrary to that right now. Because another thing I'd said, going all the way back to that post that started this conversation, I'd said in that how much I valued having people like yourself, like Abraham, in my world that were doing that calling forward piece, saying you can have a life of good feelings and joy and amazing expression and creating what you want, and you've got your miracles course. You can
Yes.
absolutely create whatever you want. And as much as it would piss me off because I was still identified as I am wrong, I also knew that it was also calling me forward. I knew there was a gift in that. And it was that tension of that which had me keep looking, saying, well, why aren't I experiencing that? Why am I not having what Dominic's talking about? Why is it not feeling like that for me? And so I kind of wanted to bring that forward, both as acknowledgement of what that frustration really is, but also acknowledgement of it being a gift in that way that it enables you, if you want it, if the will of God is going in that direction for you, you get to keep looking and saying, well, what is it in me that's going to help me experience that? What is it in me that I need to discover, unlock, change, clear, whatever? There's a million different ways we can do that.
Right.
And so if all you're ever doing is recognizing something's calling me forward, that's why I'm feeling pissed off. And now let me figure out, let me go on a quest of what's that thing then? What is it that's going to help me expand into more of that, to feel closer to that being my truth
Yeah.
than this being my truth?
Yeah. I like that really resonated how you said that. The will is always forward expansion, being more of all that I am. And anything less than that, any restriction I will suffer. So I'll suffer the restriction. And the trouble with the Dominics are that they keep lighting up the expansion. They're not even aggravating the restriction. It's just they keep lighting up the expansion, which I know I can't get to. And they also make it sound simple or easy or whatever, which is dismissive of the challenges that I have.
Yeah.
Right? In fact, I say they're bypassing. I say they're bypassing. I say that they're trying to bypass this real suffering and sort of saying you can just skip it and just go over to that. Right. So anyway, to be clear, I'm never speaking to who you think you are. The reason I cannot speak to who you think you are is that I don't know who you think you are. The only thing I know is who you really are. So I can't help who you think you are. I can't engage with you as who you think you are. Right?
So that's super cool, because if Dominic's in the world to hold the light up ahead and say,
Yeah.
come over here, I'm the one who helps with, I help you with who you think you are so that you
With
can,
who you think you are.
so I
That's
can
very good.
Yeah, yeah.
The front of the hand, there are conversations there and community and whatever there. And when that makes sense to engage and all that is fine. I don't, because it doesn't make sense, because I can't see you. I can't see you. I can't interact with you as who you think you are. Um, I'm only interacting with who I think you are.
Mm.
Now, here's the trouble in helping professions. When we come together, either you're going to convince me of who you think you are and bring me into your limitation, or I will be so certain and unmovable about who I know you to be that you will not be able to move me.
Mm. So that's where I love what I'm doing now, because I hold both. So I totally resonate with I've gone through my phases of getting
Yeah.
sucked into the story and gosh, that must be awful. But actually now I know the truth of who the person is that's come for their session, and the process deals with all the stuff of who they think they are. And so I don't buy into it. I hold both perspectives. It's like you won't convince me of who you think you are, and that's okay because I don't need to be convinced. All I need to do is help you see that it's not you. So that, yeah, I hold that space of I know that truth of who they are, and the process deals with all
Yeah.
those false limitations. that make
this is all and this is really the reason all of this is about an understanding. And so from my understanding, that's not something that's possible.
proof. I'm living
Yeah,
proof.
well, no. But what I mean is sort of by universal law, right? So
Okay.
because what happens is the only way to honor who you think you are is by honoring who you think you are. I must, I must move away, disconnect from the truth of who you are. This is why Abraham says their inner being isn't able to get them to see, right? Their inner being is with them 24/7. Your very soul is calling you to all that you are. And so Abraham says, and you think you're going to do it? You think they'll listen to you?
So I agree absolutely that it's only our being that ever heals anything. It's only our being that's ever been the light that shines and provides an insight or a recognition or a healing or anything. And sometimes having another person there helps us realize that beingness of ourselves, to enable that, to facilitate that, to help that which we are become more evident. I've absolutely been in that place where I'm so in my stuff and they're so in their stuff, and I think that I can do something to help them, especially when I thought I was wrong. And therefore, golly, if I could help them, then I'll be good, then I'll be right. So, absolutely, there were times when I'd get lost in it from that perspective because I wasn't coming from a clean place. I was coming from my own narrative, my own story, my own misunderstandings. But this modality essentially puts the client in the experience of that being, in the awareness of the identity that they've been caught up in. So all these identities play out traits. You know, if I'm playing a character in a movie, I'm going to have certain ways of thinking, feeling, behaving that make that character realistic. So in the process, we help the client to recognize the traits of this identity that they've been playing out in life. When this kind of situation happens, when that kind of person is present, oh yes, I think these kind of thoughts, I feel these kind of feelings, I behave in these kind of ways. And then we shift into the energy realm with all of that. When we have our attention on something, it creates an image. We create images of things and then they become reality. So we kind of use that capacity in reverse. Because when the image has been created to represent this identity, it's like by focusing our attention on that identity and all these traits and all this negativity, automatically an image gets generated. And then in our observation, in
Yes.
our
Yeah.
neutral observation of them,
Yeah.
they naturally grow and shrink and disappear. And in their disappearance, that's the disappearance of them out of that person's universe, out of that individual character's personal experience. And then it's gone. The reaction is gone. The trauma is gone. The idea I am wrong has no charge to it anymore. It doesn't mean anything anymore because it's just words now. It returns us to that truth of neutrality, that truth of, yeah, it's just words. So that's why this process for me is like the both and of, it resolves the human stuff, but absolutely by getting them into the experience of the beingness that they are. And the more that stuff's cleared out of the way, the more they feel their beingness, which then is that expression of joy and delight and outward flowing creation in the world, because you're no longer having to deal with the stuff in the back cupboard. Now my attention and my energy can flow out into creation in the world and use that capacity of imagination for things that will light me up, things that will bring me joy, things that will feel really good.
Yeah. Thanks for that. That gives more context and definition to what you're speaking to. A good example there of how we are front of the hand, back of the hand, front of the hand, back of the hand, continue. The moment we talk about modality, we're at the front of the hand. We are in an expressed thought constructed process. So let's see a couple of things just in terms of an understanding. Bashar says something which fits very well with what you've discovered in the process, where basically he says, in the identification of your limitation or definition, it disappears like that. And where people have argued with him, where they say, oh, no, it hasn't, or it's not that simple. Bashar says, when you see illogic or when you see nonsense, you can't think nonsense. So when thought is revealed as untrue, you can't think it. It's untrue. You can't think it. Yeah, but I keep thinking it because it came from blah, blah, blah. He's like, you haven't seen it. And he's the same way about habits, right? Oh, I have this habit and I keep doing it. He goes, that's not a habit. When you identify a behavior as habit, it's over. It's done. That's no longer a habit. After that, it's a choice. After that, you only behave that way from a choice. He's very specific to this, and it reminded me as you were describing your process, it gets to a place of literally revealing my thought. This is revealing my thought. And the experience, the way I heard you say it, it would have been like, what? I'm thinking that? But that's ridiculous, right? I'm thinking that would be ridiculous. And then it's over. But it's over in an instant because
100%.
You can't think it. You can't think something untrue when you see it's untrue.
Yeah, absolutely. And such a valuable part of that process is the ways in which we help people tap into that stuff, given it's been hidden in the cupboard. So whereas if I compare it to the very beginning of my coaching journey, way back in 2013, 14, I always remember a session where I was complaining that my kids would wake up too early and that anything with a 5 in it is too early was the belief that I held at that time. A really simple example of, with the help of him and his questions, had me go, hang on, that's ridiculous, because 5:01 is very different from 5:59. And yet I'd made this blanket rule that anything with a 5 in it is too early, and therefore I would get up. If anything had a 5 in it, well, I'm going to be exhausted today, aren't I? I've seen that, like that simple level at which we can see stuff as untrue and go, oh, that's ridiculous. I've seen it at the level of that truth of who we are and like looking at all the evidence that points to the fact we're not really just this body, we're not really this person, there's something much greater that we are. And when you see that, that's a similar kind of like, oh, that's ridiculous to think that I was just a person. And then yeah, same with this process. It's like the questions we use, the process we use has those things be revealed, which interestingly, yeah, to greater or lesser extent during the process, there can be a wrangle for people sometimes of like this feeling that I need this. Like if I lose this, if I'm not this anymore, well, but this keeps me safe, but this protects me, but this, that can all be part of the process as well. And helping people really actually recognize, well, but is that actually true? Is this actually helping you? Or is this actually bringing you down? Is this actually causing you to suffer? And again, when that is seen by the being, then the process continues with ease because the being has then gone, oh yeah, that's ridiculous. And so we're back into the ease of the process again with it disappearing because, yeah, that level of truth that we are just goes, well, that's nuts. Like it is, of course, it's not true that I'm not good enough. Let's get that one out of our system.
You and I both have this experience, both in non-duality, in Sydney Banks' teaching, lesser in Abraham, and it'll be very rigorous with Bashar. And that's the idea that process is unnecessary. Doing is unnecessary, right? So doing can't fix being. No process over here will ever change God. Nothing will ever affect something before. Something manifested, that which is created cannot create. So if my fascination with these things is, then why does it seem to create? Because if I take the starting point, which I do from insight, I say, oh my God, that makes total sense. A Lego figure cannot create anything in the Lego land. So that's it. That for me is simple and clear. So I can't get into or ever feel an inspiration of getting the Lego figure to do 3 steps. Like I can't ever do that because it doesn't make any sense to me that that Lego figure could ever transform itself. So, but then I get curious about, but what does do that, and what in truth explains it? Abraham, as far as other people helping us, what Abraham says is, and I really got this with my children, Abraham would say, stop trying to get them to do things. Stop trying to get them to live a good life. They have an inner being for that. They have a soul that is for their thriving. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want them making mistakes, and I don't want these issues happening. Plus, look at them. They're stuck. They are suffering. So I'm going to help them with that too. And this is where Abraham says, well, but if their inner being isn't able to communicate, how can you communicate? When you see their suffering, you are matched to it. Otherwise, it's imperceivable to you. Otherwise, it is not an experience that you're seeing. You would have a different interpretation of what's going on with them when you are not in the vibration that would experience something like that. So basically, what Abraham would speak to is get in alignment with your inner being, healer, helper, get in alignment with your inner being. And when you are in alignment with your own inner being, you are no longer disconnected. You are in pure alignment with all that is. Coincidentally, you are now in harmony with their inner being. So you are not in harmony with them. You are in harmony with their inner being. You are in harmony with the truth of who they are. You are in harmony with the inner being calling them. You are not in harmony with them. And now in that moment, you are useful. If there is something for you to do because you are nearby and you are the one, because they're not hearing their inner being, but you can be inspired to words. You can be inspired to words that they can hear, right? You can be inspired to process that they can hear, that they can do something with. So you become now cooperative component to what's going on. But how do you do that? You must be in your own alignment. Right? And then we could say the inner being may inspire you to speak because you have a mastery of something that I don't. I am not a cooperative component with what the path of least resistance for that person is. Because the inner being is only ever calling them by their path of least resistance. And so the inner being, from a harmony perspective, says, whoa, that Dominic guy, way too geeky. That is just like, no way. Helen's speaking and her grounding and solidness in a communication process. They will hear this, that they will hear. And in this moment, given what is around that person, you are the path of least resistance to what they want. You are in pure alignment, and you're not sacrificing in your helping of them. There's no diminishment of you. There's no sacrifice in you in reaching out and having this conversation with that person. In fact, you come alive. You come alive and are thriving in being able to have that conversation. So the best in you will call up. So the vibration, a higher vibration will, not always, Abraham will say not always, but a higher vibration has certainly more power. The most dominant, most intense, and strongest vibration will dominate an interaction. So that's why your grounding becomes so important. If your client is really, really in an intense vibration of the victim that they are, and you are not in a strong alignment of their entire power of who they really are, they will bring you down to their vibration.
Absolutely.
The energies will dominate. They will bring you down, and you will become a cooperative component in their story. You will not uplift them.
No, I love that, Dominic. Absolutely. And I've been there and I've done that. And yeah, it's so different. It's so different to hold that, that vibration of that being, because when you're so solid in it. And I really love the fact that, yes, you began that talking about kind of the modalities and like, why would I do something? To me, all the doings are facilitation techniques and tools. It's part of the experience of being human to have some of these ways of connecting and doing stuff together, which all has the same ultimate goal of more beingness, therefore more creation in the world, more expansion. In terms of this one, it was like when this one came and I knew it was right for me, and instantly I was training with it. So I didn't wait and go, oh, let me see if it works for me. I was straight in there with the training to be a practitioner. Because it was like, just like you said, it's that when we find those things that light us up, that have us thrive, and it doesn't matter what it is, we've got all these options available to us. And if I'm the option for you, then amazing. Like, this is the thing I'm doing. This is the thing I love. This is what has me, like you say, feel thriving and at my best. So if you want to do this with me, amazing. I love working with people who want to do this with me. And if you don't, then no worries. Like, you'll find your thing. You'll find your way.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this into the closing with that, because the being, the fact that this doing and this process, well, this is again in a front of the hand, back of the hand. There's no such thing as being that is unexpressed. Right? There's no such thing as being that is unexpressed. So we can't get a Helen who's not doing something. That's a concept. There is not a Helen not doing something. Now, what you described, which I think is so cool, is, but I couldn't stop. I had to sign up for this. Which, see, that then in my language says, that was not Helen who signed up for that.
Yeah, no.
That for me is,
what? This is so irresponsible.
That's not Helen who signed up for that. That's your soul. That's the back of the hand, the soul, the non-physical being that is you, wanting to play in this playground with thought. And in the playing in this playground, the way is the excitement. Because in other words, you could have gone around and said, oh, there's this course, it's an ICF training on that, and you would feel something. Oh, there's this other option, it's on a very, very new advanced NLP thing, and you would feel something. And then you came across this thing and you felt something, right? So that's not you. So that is your soul going, this one, this one, this one, this one. This is the one, right, that I want to play with. This is the one I want to master. I want to use. Abraham says, you are at the leading edge of thought. You are as far as thought has gone. So you imagine your soul, that process, it's kind of finite process. Let me add it. I want to grab that process and I want to think through that process, bringing more of the truth into this process, expanding it into a further and further. This is why all teachings must evolve. This is why all processes must continue to expand. It's because that non-physical energy will never sit still. And the minute it squeezes itself into a finite form, that form must express more of what it is, which you and I feel as desire. So it's interesting listening to this. You didn't pick it, but something wants you to be there. And it's clear from the way you light up that you come alive when you're in it, and you would be quite suppressed if you couldn't do it or you couldn't explore it. That would be a bit of a problem. So,
yeah, nice final reflection. Thank you very much.
wow. Well, thank you. Anything you want just to complete, and also, by the way, where people will find you, and I'm going to get your link and stuff so people can find you.
Yeah, thank you. My business world, Fig Solutions. Just to reiterate that message, it is like it's whatever is right for you is right for you. Even if I've had things that was right for me, and then later on I was like, oh, that was so wrong. I shouldn't have done that. And then in hindsight going, oh no, that was so right. I learned so much from that wrong thing.
Yeah.
So I really, really encourage people to just do stuff, go for stuff, try stuff. You're going to get amazing things and you're going to get lessons. And that to me is all part of this whole expansion experience. So yeah.
All right. Well, very good. They'll have a link to be able to get to you. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Dominic.
Helen.